shots with it
Okay.
when I used to live on a Navy ship.
I
They used to call me Pablo Escobar.
Alright, hi there, I'm James Cooper and I'm here to tell you guys all about nuclear power and why it is needed for the betterment of our society. So, first off, we got to figure out like how does a nuclear power plant work, because from what I've the surveys that I've taken, nuclear power, they are all like, oh, I think this is dangerous, and they don't quite understand how the nuclear power plants work. They think that like, oh, it's a lot of radiation and they can blow up. But actually, the thing that happens most of the time in disasters is there's a meltdown, which is the opposite of it blowing up. It actually submerges the rods in water so that they can't burn anymore, so that it cools them off very quickly. So you have the control rods, which are there to control the reaction, and once they're submerged, nothing else can happen, and there's not going to be any more nuclear reactions after that. You got your reactor vessel and you got your steam generators. So what happens is you get the yellow cake uranium and you put it into the steam generators, and what you gotta do is you create a catalyst for the reaction, and you have controlled explosions inside of that to heat up the water so that the steam goes through the generators and it goes through a turbine, as one would say. And the turbine turns the generator, and the power goes into a transformer, which goes out into the electrical grid. Now the water is actually cleaned in a water tower, which the steam from this is pure H2O. There's no radiation inside of it. It's actually a lot cleaner than the coal power plants, which have the same water stacks. Now here's just another illustration for the reactor vessel as water to cool down the reaction so that there isn't a meltdown. And a meltdown it burns the entire thing, and the entire plant is pretty much destroyed. It can't create electricity if it doesn't have anything to contain it and to turn the rods. And then it goes into the turbine when it's heated up, and it goes to generator, basic what I said. And now we have a advanced gas cool reactor, which it takes the nuclear waste that is often at the bottom. Once everything's burned off, it doesn't burn as much. It takes nuclear waste, then it superheats that to create even further nuclear reactions so that it can heat up more water and spin more turbines until there's only about 5% of the waste left, which is a lot more than in previous decades where there was as much as 90% of the waste left. And they actually have, in France, they have nuclear power plants running with this system in mind. And here's just a nuclear fission. You have a neutron absorption. You have uranium, which is like yellow cake. Then they add in different elements to create it splits the atoms, basically, is what happens. And then it goes off more and more, and as they split smaller and smaller. And then splitting so fast, it creates rapid movement of the particles, which generates a lot of heat, which can be used to create electricity through steam power. And this is a picture of yellow cake uranium, which it doesn't emit radiation like uranium found commonly in ores and such. It's refined down to that state, and once it's in that state, you have to either ingest it to get a radiation poisoning, or it has to get through the air through dust, and you have to breathe it into your lungs. And this right here is a fusion reactor, which is actually in France. They have the ITER fusion reactor, and this has no nuclear waste at all. They have metal rings that have a magnetic field, and they have plasma inside of the rings, which then these coils, they superheat up as the plasma creates more and more of a reaction, but it's controlled in these magnetic fields so that it can't go out or pop out, because if it touches any of the coils, then it will just cool off very rapidly, and you won't get as much of a heat and reaction. You won't get nearly as much electricity if it touches the side, because it will cool off in a very quick manner. This actually uses thorium, which these are thorium pellets. They're a lot cleaner and safer than uranium, actually, and you don't get nearly as much radiation off of it. This is a picture of the ITER nuclear facility in France, which is currently using fusion power. Right now it's operating at about 25% efficiency, but with more funding and more research it can be operating at nearly 200% efficiency. And this is a common photo. You know how in Fukushima and such, they were all like, oh, this is radiation, like it's radioactive snow that they're pushing off, but really they're just cleaning off the deck. This is soap. You can clearly see that they're using these aren't shovels, the bristles, you can see that they are brooms, cleaning off the
Good presentation.
And this is a Virginia-class attack submarine because, if you may not know, the U.S. Navy has been using nuclear power in their submarines for decades, and nothing has happened so far. Just to quell some of your concerns about, like, oh, it's going to go nuclear. These were made a long time ago. And then this is in Chernobyl. A lot of people say, oh, nuclear reaction, they go out and stuff. And when they like, oh, this nuclear reaction, it's like, oh man, it melted down. It's going all nuclear, man. We can't live here for years because of the radiation. But actually, as this Geiger counter shows, in Chernobyl, the radiation levels have dropped steadily, and there's a lot of growth in the region that it could be inhabitable. And that's the end of my presentation, but I just want to go on with a few more statistics, and I'd like to ask you guys some questions after the after I go off with this. Okay, so with these all in mind and such, you can now see that nuclear power, it has a lot of potential in the future, and it doesn't nearly get enough funding. They thought that they would have full potential in fusion reactors 70 years ago, but because of the lack of government funding due to like Chernobyl and other disasters, because of bad management, there has been a severe lack of funding in nuclear reactions, in nuclear reactors, and it's really bad because just one pellet could sustain an entire city for a month. One of those thorium pellets, an entire city the size of Los Angeles. And I'd like to ask you all, like, what are your views of nuclear power after this presentation? If you guys need any more convincing, what type of details are you guys unclear about?
Well, what about the waste?
Well, with fusion reaction, there is zero waste. And with the, let's see if I can get back to it. This actually burns off the waste. It was created about 10 years ago by 2 MIT students and has many prototypes, and it's been working in France for a little while now, and it's reported to create a massive amount. France actually has most of their power coming from nuclear power.
So is there no more spent rods? I mean, what about...
This uses the spent rods. They're used up in entirety.
So they use them to where they don't have to go and shove them under a mountain anymore?
No, that was way back when, and they don't do that now with new facilities. That's why they need more funding, because if they can build new, better facilities, they aren't going to need all of that, like, shoving rods and stuff under mountains. Because that, not only does that, like, ruin the environment, it also ruins people's perception of nuclear power if they're using, like, old facilities that actually hurt the environment more than they help. But now nuclear power with facilities being made, and nowadays in countries like France and all across the EU, nuclear power is a lot cleaner and safer than coal. Only 3 people died in the last year from nuclear power, and that's because of the they were killed in the chemical explosions from the pressurized steam that they were using when they were unlocking valves. In coal power plants, there are about 400,000 people that die every year working at the coal power plants just from day-to-day jobs. And actually, working at a nuclear power plant, an interesting fact is that you get as much radiation as being in Congress because of the radioactive isotopes that were used to lay the groundwork of the congressional buildings and such in D.C. Thank you all for listening to my presentation. Is there any questions that you have about the subject?
Where do you get thorium or whatever?
Thorium is actually found all across the world. It's a lot of it's in Kentucky actually, which is near the Midwest. There's a distribution chart. I wish I included that because I did not anticipate. I was actually going to include that, but I didn't anticipate that question.
So it's norm, basically. It's naturally occurring radioactive
a lot of it's in
material.
Australia too. A lot like where uranium is also. Yes.
Is that why Kentucky has a lot of inbreeding because of all the radiation?
I think that might just be a cultural thing. Well, thank you all for listening. Good night.
Do you have a survey?
I had a survey. Yeah, I talked about it. at the beginning.
Oh, okay. So we're good?
Yeah.
All right.
Alan